rainy morning in the city. The streets were wet, and the air smelled faintly of freshly baked bread from the cafe on the corner. Inside, people were chatting over steaming mugs, the clinking of cups blending with soft music in the background. The door opened slowly, and in stepped an elderly woman named Amina. Her faded coat was damp from the rain, her hands calloused from years of hard work. She walked with careful steps, as if each one carried the weight of a lifetime. She spotted an empty corner table and quietly sat down. Amina wasn't there to take up space or disturb anyone. She simply wanted one small comfort: a warm cup of tea to thaw her cold bones after hours of sweeping the streets. She folded her umbrella, placed it beside her chair, and waited patiently for someone to take her order. From behind the counter, Daniel, the head waiter, noticed her. His eyes scanned her worn-out clothes, her simple shoes, the damp ends of her hair. He sighed heavily, muttering under his breath, "Just what we need, another one of them hanging around." He picked up a notepad and walked over, plastering on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What do you want?" he asked sharply. Amina looked up, startled by his tone. "Just a cup of tea, please. With a little sugar." Daniel tilted his head, glancing around the cafe. His voice grew louder, enough for the other customers to hear. "You know, this isn't exactly a shelter. Our regular customers come here to enjoy themselves. They don't want to lose their appetite." The room grew quiet. Someone at a nearby table looked over their shoulder. Amina's cheeks warmed with embarrassment. "I have money," she whispered, reaching for her small purse. "I can pay." Daniel smirked. "It's not about the money, lady. It's about standards." He turned, grabbed a cup of tea from the counter, and walked back. But instead of placing it gently in front of her, he set it down carelessly. The cup tipped, and hot tea spilled over the table, splashing onto her hands and coat. Amina flinched at the heat but didn't raise her voice. She simply took a napkin and began dabbing the mess. "Thank you," she murmured quietly, though her voice trembled. Without another word, she gathered her things, stood up, and slowly walked out into the rain. At the far side of the cafe, a young man in a leather jacket had been watching the whole time. He didn't interfere, didn't speak, but his eyes followed her as she disappeared through the doorway. He placed some money on the table, stood up, and walked out as well. Daniel didn't notice. He was already joking with another customer, as if nothing had happened. 2 days later, the cafe owner walked in looking unusually excited. "Big day, everyone," he announced. "We have a VIP booking tomorrow. The entire cafe reserved for a private event. And it's already paid for, in full." He glanced at Daniel. "Make sure you're on your best behavior. The guest is important, and very influential in the city." The next afternoon, the atmosphere was tense but polished. Every table was spotless, the air filled with the smell of fresh pastries. Outside, a black car pulled up, followed by 2 more. Security guards stepped out first, scanning the surroundings. Then, the door opened, and in walked that same young man from 2 days ago, but now he wore a perfectly tailored suit. Daniel's eyes widened slightly in recognition, but he brushed it off and put on his polite waiter face. The man moved with quiet confidence, shaking hands with the cafe owner, then taking a seat at the center table. Soon, the place was full of well-dressed guests, chatting and smiling. After a few minutes, the young man stood and tapped his glass gently. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Before we start, I'd like to introduce the true guest of honor." The door at the back of the cafe opened. And there she was, Amina. But this time, she was not wearing her damp old coat. She wore a beautiful sari of deep maroon, her hair neatly tied, her eyes calm but strong. She stepped forward slowly, her hands clasped in front of her. Gasps spread through the room. Daniel froze, his heart thudding in his chest. The young man smiled warmly. "Everyone, this is my mother. She raised me alone. She swept streets so I could go to school. She went hungry so I could eat. She worked in the rain, in the cold, in the heat, just so I could have a chance at life." Without her sacrifices, I wouldn't be standing here today. Murmurs filled the room. Some guests nodded respectfully. Others glanced at Daniel, who had turned pale. The man continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. 2 days ago, in this very cafe, my mother was treated with disrespect. Not because of who she is, but because of what she looked like. Because someone assumed she was less. Let me make one thing clear. My mother is the greatest person I have ever known. And anyone who treats her as less, treats me as less. Daniel swallowed hard. He could feel every eye in the room on him. His hands trembled as he adjusted his apron. The man turned directly toward him. Kindness costs nothing, he said slowly. But cruelty can cost you everything. Remember that you never know who someone really is, or what they've done for the world. The silence was heavy. Daniel took a deep breath and stepped forward. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his voice shaking. I was wrong. Amina looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded gently. Treat every soul with respect, son. We're all here for only a short while. The event went on. People shared stories of kindness, resilience, and sacrifice. The young man pledged to fund a community program that would provide free meals to street workers every week. The cafe owner agreed to host it. And Daniel volunteered to help, hoping to learn the lesson he had ignored for far too long. Weeks later, the cafe had changed. On Sundays, the corner table was always reserved for the street sweepers, garbage collectors, and other workers the city usually overlooked. Daniel would greet them with a smile and a warm drink. And every time he did, he remembered the day he learned the most important truth of all, that the richest people in the world aren't the ones with money, but the ones with kindness in their hearts.